Hello, I'm Rick Steiner, and welcome to another episode of Lux Life Discovered. Our guest today is Todd Anthony Tyler, and he's back with us for another men's style segment. So, Todd, welcome back.
Thank you very much, Rick. Always a pleasure to chat with you about style and be on the podcast. Greatly
It's
enjoy it.
always one of my favorite. You're always one of my favorite guests, so this will be interesting and informative. So, as we're closing out summer, all the kids are going back to school, and everybody's wrapping up vacations, and you're always thinking with school back in session, then it's all your mind immediately goes to fall. So, let's talk about fall fashion, some do's, don'ts, and what do you think will be trending this fall?
Okay, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're coming to the end of that summer season, so we're on to what's happening for fall winter 2024 with men. Uh, what I always like to start, of course, with any style conversation, as you know, these are ideas. These are things that are going on. These might not apply to everyone. There might be some age range to certain ideas as well. Like for myself, for example, I like to suit up a little more often than be casual. Some people like to be casual. Some people like to suit up. So these are just
Right.
kind of what kind of colors we're looking at, what kind of tones we're looking at, textures, some ideas that are happening here in 2024.
Okay.
And then I have to admit, I sort of picked out some of the ideas that I personally like more seeing on people than maybe some of the other ideas that are going around. But we can talk about those ideas too, for sure.
Okay, and well, let's also talk about some of the don'ts at some point too, because I
Right.
think
Okay.
people need to know that as well. There are some things that you just shouldn't do, and we need an expert to tell us that as well, because
Sure.
keeps us from making a mistake and going out in public, and then we're that poster child for, man, that didn't work. It's
Well, absolutely. I mean, I definitely, I think you already know I was doing style talks and all this sort of thing for at least 10 plus years now. And 5, 6 years ago, started to change a little bit more about who am I? What do I like to wear? Definitely was always about what works with you, but there's a lot of rules around what's my body shape, where do I live? Of course, is part of the ideas as well. Different countries have different ideas on what they're wearing. I'm just saying that because I always find it a bit challenging to say, don't do that. You
well,
know,
that's
it's
true. Yeah.
it's a little hard to say that these days. Before there was like, don't mix the browns and the blacks. Oh, don't put that belt with those shoes. Oh, it's like September 15th now. Why are you wearing white? There's like a lot of things like that were definitely hard fixed into the matrix of how to dress previously. The doors have really swung open on those ideas. Uh, a person's character, individuality, expression, all those types of things. We tend to not want to, you know, box people in and say, don't do that, don't do that. I mean, there are some, I guess, very obvious things when it comes to textures, colors. But even there, I've honestly found it increasingly difficult in my experience to really say, those patterns don't go. Some things are very it might even be obvious, like, you're putting polka dots with checks with some stripes. That doesn't work for your body type. That doesn't work overall. Those colors don't work. Definitely, because a big example again, color wheel. I always used to reference everyone to the color wheel. You look at the color wheel, and there you can take that as a starting point on how to put your pieces together. What's complementary, what's contrasting, what kind of colors. You can take that color wheel, post it up in your closet, and you can define a lot of your outfits based on the color wheel. I still think that holds true. I still think classically, you still want to look at something like the color wheel to judge on putting your colors together, oranges, blues, putting your colors together. Uh, but even there, you can see if we go into the range of, let's call it high fashion, uh, all those rules start to really fly out the window because people are putting all kinds of colors together, all kinds of patterns, all kinds of textures together.
Right.
So,
And for
and I
some
just
situations, it does work, and they're able to put off, and it goes back to the person's character and personality and that type of thing. But there's some that same, even if they pull it off, there's some situations where that's not appropriate. you know?
Right. And
And
that's a very good point. That's a very good point there, because now we're talking about, we almost have to speak about style, about where you work, where's your community, and maybe even a little bit like who's your circle of friends. Um, Definitely there's some places and situations where there's outfits that you're not going to be wanting, something super flamboyant, perhaps, obviously something more somber. You're not going to go all dressed up like that at those particular occasions, and you would not highly suggest that to anyone at all anyway. On top of that, workplace, there are some rules still to workplaces. A lot of people working from home now, but there are some rules to workplace, business attire next to fashion attire. Definitely, you still have those rules in play, I would say,
right,
overall. It's just, again, I think the current trend and nature of even culture itself is, to a sense, everything goes. So that's why it makes it really hard to like really narrow down. Don't do that. Do this. Don't do that. And that's all I'm saying there on those points. And that's why I generally try to give people more so direction, like saying, okay, like for example, what I'm wearing today is a great example of some of the tones for this fall. We have, and also combined with the corduroy jacket. It's actually a whole suit, but you can't see that. But it's a corduroy suit jacket. So right there. So right now, corduroy is really hot. Corduroy is definitely a 2024 fall winter trend. Uh, some people, depending on your age group and age range, have had different experiences with corduroy for sure. And some people definitely not seeing it as an entire suit. But I can say right now that definitely all tones of corduroy are in for suits, but primarily those more muted tones for fall, winter, camel, like what I'm wearing here, maybe olive greens, navies also in for fall, winter, a nice navy corduroy suit. Definitely you'll be looking good. And a good thing about corduroy also is that, sort of like our conversation we're having there, you can almost bring that up a little bit to be to a meeting that's more business oriented, or you can dress that down a little bit to be more semi-casual, or like a little bit like I did today, went with a little bolder shirt, and just kind of made it a touch more fashion direction. So there's a lot that you can play with there when you go with corduroy. And again, that's definitely one of the hot fabrics for 2024 fall winter.
corduroy has made its way to the forefront and then in the background and back to the forefront several times. So it's
Yeah,
the fabric that doesn't go away.
yeah. And that's why I said earlier, I would go with the different age ranges on what your experience has been
Yeah.
with corduroy. Some people think it's a super cool fabric. Other people think, I remember when
I
I
had to
wouldn't be
wear it. There was no
content
option.
wearing that. Yeah.
Oh
So,
yeah. I do remember that. Yeah.
yeah, I also kind of remember that. So that that's why it's an interesting thing to go with the trends and introducing to different people and what their reaction is to that, of course.
Right. And then also with the new different generations being exposed to it, they bring different ideas to it that sometimes it's great and sometimes it's one of those you scratch your head and you're like, I could never do that, that type thing. But it's fun to see how things go in cycles and then the way you can go different directions with it.
Yes, absolutely. And that just brings to a good point about men's dress pants right now. So men's dress pants, you probably recall, say 2 years ago, maybe three, that they were like super tight. It looks like you were wearing leggings or something
Right.
like that. People were going like super tailored, over the top almost, in my opinion. But that was kind of a bit of a trend for a while, and a little extra short, which also I wasn't personally really into, but you would see that trend going
Yes.
around. Now, similarly, at that time, I personally was still wearing a little bit more of a loose cut in my pants. And interesting, if I can interject for a moment, I used to get a little bit of, I wouldn't call it hate DMs, but I would have people on my style blog saying, hey man, those pants are not current, they're kind of baggy, da da da. Well,
and
now
they weren't baggy
20,
technically. Yeah,
2024, we're back to kind of loose fit baggy pants. So I'm just going to say that I was ahead of the trend there.
that's right.
Yeah,
You were setting the trend, and people didn't realize it.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. But again, part of my point there is what you were saying. It's just that things come back around.
right.
That's why you someday maybe I give you a small tour of my closet. You say, why are you still holding that? I can almost guarantee you in 3 to 4 years it's going to come back around
That's
again.
true. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
if you want this,
is your closet huge? We'll just talk about
well,
that in a minute.
it's a walk-in for sure.
Yeah. So who has a larger closet, you or your wife?
Me.
I figured that.
She always she always kind of not jokingly, but sort of always saying like, you have more than me. I said, but that's not part of what I say. Yeah, but those pants aren't in right now, so I need to save them. I'm gonna wear these pants now.
That's
That's my
great.
excuse anyway. Plus, I always say suits take up a lot more space than dresses.
That's true. That's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. And
So,
so what do you have on the mannequin behind you?
so this is actually one of my favorite suits, and I just brought it in because the tones and the color. But in part, it just brings me to corduroy being one of the fall trends. Another one, bold patterns, is a big thing for 2024. This is not super bold, but for your traditional suit, definitely you can almost. This is like a fashion style, but I think you could get away with this also in a business meeting, depending on on what the company is, I guess, of the business meeting. But it's just got that touch of a little bit of a bold pattern, and also sort of mixing in a little bit of a bolder pattern
Hmm.
on the tie, not just a plain tie.
Right.
Uh, that's in part why we have that up there. Uh, Bold patterns and prints, definitely one of those big trends for 2024. You'll see that even larger. Definitely, like say the houndstooth suit. You're going to see like huge houndstooth patterns now being a big trend in suits, or on sweaters, shirts as well. I always default a little bit to suits just because I wear them more
Right.
often. But bold patterns, another big thing that you're going to see. Plaid and check, also a big thing for 2024.
Okay. So speaking of plaid and checks and the bold patterns, so when you're doing a tie with a jacket like that, so rather than doing just like the plain color, do the color, but do some kind of texture with it.
Yes, absolutely. I think
Okay.
that starts to be elevating your overall look because there are some basic rules again, like say you have a plain or non-patterned suit jacket, then you put a patterned shirt, then you probably put a non or very faint patterned tie. That was just their
Okay.
basic rules. Obviously, the big killer rule is never put a cufflet pocket square that matches your tie, because that's the in the sort of sartorial world, that would be the first moment like people going, your pocket square is matching your tie. No, 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 don't do that. That would be one of those hard rules that I think doesn't go away, actually. So that would be a good rule not to, do not do that.
So what should the pocket square match then? The shirt
So you're
or
always like here, I went with a little bit more of the tone of the shirt.
right?
Definitely that works. It's just outside of the textures, which I think textures is like level 3 for me when you start to talk about how to put something together. First, first would be those basic rules of a solid with a pattern, with a faint pattern or solid. Then you start to go with, okay, now we're going to mix up more patterns. So then we have to start thinking more about colors and tones now. So that's what the idea is there. You want to have a feel for full disclosure, I probably tried about 8 ties on that before I found the one that I was really liking. Not everybody has that kind of time. I actually probably don't really have that time either, but
Right.
I just
But-
wanted it to look exactly the way I felt like I wanted it to look. So I
right.
took the time. But my point there, just a little bit, is that you probably will take a little time to try different ties, especially when you're going a little beyond the basic rules.
Okay.
So as you can see probably here as well, there's a little touch of yellow. So the yellow is a little bit of a pop and a little extra. It's like a yellow gold in the tie. That just brings another element to the whole look in the outfit. So we have obviously the pattern in the jacket, a little bit of blue in the button, then a lighter shirt underneath that also has a little bit of a check pattern inside,
Okay.
solid pocket square, and then the tie is where you can always go a little bit more crazy or a little bit more interesting or expression in the tie. So there we have like a diamond pattern with a texture to the tie, which might not be as evident, but there's a small texture to the tie, and then very faint little gold yellow dots
Just for a little
to
accent
bring it
there.
all together.
Okay. What color slacks would you wear with that? Or just
Uh,
pants?
in this case, this is again, I guess we can't see the whole thing, but this is an entire suit in this
Oh, okay.
pattern.
Okay.
But if you wanted to just use this as a blazer, definitely you could. I would just go with a dark. So that's a good point here. This is another, say, rule that I would still generally follow just for aesthetics and how it looks. Again, you can go crazy and put purple pants, and maybe you could try that. But I would just say I would just go with a navy blue. Usually you go one way or the other. A little lighter on top, darker in the bottom, or a little darker on top and lighter on the bottom.
Okay.
You can use that basic rule. And so in this case, if I was just using this as a blazer instead of the full suit, excuse me, I would just put a nice navy pant with it.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So accessories. How do you accessorize your selections?
So for men's, obviously it's always the watch tends to be one of the key accessories. It depends, of course, to start talking about go super individualized. You might even go as far to say what tattoos you have or what piercings you have. But if you're just talking in general, then one of the first things tends to be the watch. Even though a lot of people now defaulting to just looking at the phone for their time,
Right.
I think a men's watch is still. I think in general, when I have conversations with fellow, men as friends, um, cars, maybe what whiskey you drink, uh, and watches, they tend to be still something that they're really interested in. And so I think watch is still a key accessory for your look. And then after that, you start to like personally, I really like to wear shirts with cuffs and still like to do the cufflinks thing. I think it's a point of interest, conversational piece of sorts. Also brings a little bit of vintage into your outfit. Personally, I always like to bring a little bit of vintage into the outfit. So if you're into cuffed shirts, French cuff shirts, and your cufflinks, when you're laying out your look, of course, you're going to be considering your cufflinks. And then from there, if you have your cufflinks, you're talking about golds, silvers, if you have a stone, what kind of expression you're trying to make with it. I personally try to stay away from what we like funny cufflinks, like a Batman cufflinks or something like that.
Right.
I tend to do a little more classic cufflinks, but again, that just depends on the individual and where you're going. And then from there, people also tend to layer on some jewelry. Obviously, if you're talking about suits, you're not really seeing the chain that you're wearing, though I would say there has been a trend to wear the chain on the outside. It has been a trend that I think depending on the group of people, but you could do that.
And
And
some people
then
can pull that off, some can't. Yeah.
yeah, I tried it. I I I didn't mind it. I thought it was kind of hip and cool. But I just thought I'm not that young. And I don't like to pigeonhole people in like, oh, you should wear like old people clothes now, sort of
Right. But
thing.
it does depend on their personality and
Yeah,
yeah.
it just like, yeah, I'm not wearing the chain. It was fun to try, but didn't work for me. But it's still an option for accessory. And then from there, of course, oh, did oh, okay, it just blanked out for a minute for me.
Sorry.
Okay, there we go. So yeah, we are just talking about how you have the chain as an accessory. of course, if you're wearing something where it's visual, well, that's an option. But if you're talking about suits, you could technically wear it on the outside. But along with the watch, a lot of people like to put bracelets, and there you can layer on different textures, different colors, different tones of bracelets. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of that, but I do see that.
So
Uh,
what are some do's and don'ts, if that's I don't know if that's the right word, but like combining textures, especially for the fall? Like
yeah.
because I know you can get too carried away trying to add too much. Does that make sense?
Yes, yeah. I don't want to keep repeating and saying that I don't like to tell people too much, but yes, absolutely. There's a balance. I think all, and that's part of why I like talking about men's style or suiting up or dressing nicely, and all those considerations, because it's really about the balance, the color, the texture, outside of what the trend is or what the season is. That balance always comes down to primarily color and texture, and with that layering. So you want to, yeah, like right now, again, I mentioned corduroys, one of the textures for the season. Wool, cashmere tends to be fall, winter go to, but definitely in 2024, still the same. Teddy plush material, also pretty hot for 2024. So now you're thinking, okay, you know, what are my pants? So I have a corduroy pants. Then I'm going to layer in maybe a shirt underneath that with a sweater. How big is the weave of the sweater?
Right.
How, there's all types of different, like heavier, fuzzier sweaters, big corded sweaters, uh, all those textures you're going to be considering that with you're already wearing the corduroy. Then of course you bring in there outside of the texture, the color, what you have top and bottom. But yes, like even layering, if we go with layering has been around for a little while, but still remains a very big thing. Part of the layering for 2024 is mixing sort of tech clothing with sort of, that more functional clothing with more fashion clothing. Yeah, you'll see that happening, of course. But just like you're mentioning with the textures, layering can also go a little over the top about how many layers you put on, uh,
Sure.
and just get lost in the mix. So I think the key thing there is you're always thinking about balance. Does Not everyone has the eye per se, but generally speaking, you can look in the mirror and feel like, does this look balanced? I think that would be your key thought
Right.
on how you put your look together.
I've seen some people lately. I'm thinking, is there no one at home that tells them that that doesn't work, or what do
Right.
they see when they look in the mirror? And but are there any colors to avoid? Or again, it depends on personality and where you're going, right?
Yeah, that's a little bit I mean, I touched on that. I think navy blue, a big color. Camel's a big color for 2024. Greens are a big fall winter color. Slightly more muted tones as kind of traditionally are for the fall winter season. Of course, everyone kind of breaks out a lot of color around Christmas. That's I
Right.
think a whole other season and probably a whole other conversation. Um, but yeah, you're moving away from the white suit or red or super bright colors. Uh, I tend to start pulling out the pink suit again in April with Easter time. Just overall muted colors now. The oranges, the bright reds, the bright blues, like I deferred to there, the pink suit that I always love to wear. Um, you kind of put that away a little bit now for the
Right.
fall winter season.
All right. What about shoes?
Shoes, yeah, shoes are really still in the chunky era. Uh, that's not for everyone as well. And I go back to the corduroy, depending on perhaps your age demographic and
Hmm.
experience. Some of those chunky shoes, you're like, I would have got beat up in school wearing those shoes, sort of thing. But it's still a pretty big. Not so much with if you talk about formal. Formals tends to still be a very slick classic shoe.
Right.
The monk shoe actually very trendy and big right now on the more formal direction. But a semi-formal And if we move into getting away a little bit from all the suit combo and a little bit more casual, definitely boots, chunky shoes. That's still a big trend right now in 2024 for sure.
Well, I think we've covered this before, but like the tennis shoes with the suits,
Yeah,
that's not for me. But and some people pull it off. Like again, it depends on age, personality, character, what they do for a living, that type thing. Then you watch some people, and I'm not gonna pinpoint anybody, but then you see somebody in that same profession who's older, and the suits don't fit like they do the younger guys, but they're still trying to look like the young guys, and it's like, man, what are you thinking? You know,
yeah,
that type thing. So
absolutely. That's why whenever anyone asks me to style them or help them with their whole style game, that's what we're always looking at. Like that's why I always start with the same thing. Like doors are all open. We're not going to shut anything down. But let's take a look at where you work, where you socialize, what kind of or where you aspire to be, and probably your age range. We're not going to pigeonhole you, but what your age range is, and then nobody seems to like to speak about this because of, say, the current conversations in communities. But I think you still need to look at your body shape.
right,
If you're shorter, if you're taller, if you're rounder, if you're more athletic, they're all different. Just like the colors, the textures, the balance, the layering. That's also a consideration to your shape. And I think in fashion you or styling and dressing, I think you can't get away from that conversation, even though we don't want to maybe say, oh, only slender people should wear that, only H frame people should wear that, only athletic people should wear that. I know we don't want to say that, and then we're not trying to say only people should do that, but it's kind of sort of like a physical truth of sorts. Uh, just that, yeah, certain shapes look better with certain outfits,
sure,
and
yeah,
it's just. I mean, if you try to do the super body conscious suit, or like those pants that were super trendy 2 3 years ago, definitely for some people looking like they're wearing leggings in a suit that's going to bust open, that's not complimentary. That's
right,
not
right.
doing any that's not helping their style game at all.
That's true.
Yeah. So you
What?
still have to have that conversation, of course.
Oh, definitely. Well, I tell you what, I appreciate you being with us again. I always look forward to this segment because I'm glad we started this because it just gives an insight to men's fashion and men's style that there's not a lot of people have access to. So I appreciate it.
No, it's my pleasure. I always like to have these conversations, and I enjoy speaking to you, Rick.
All right, well, thanks. And thank you for joining us for another episode of Lux Life Discovered. We'll see you soon.